Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are talking all about how to make peace with your past and move on with your life. Now, many clients come to us because they are suffering with unresolved childhood pain, trauma, and injustices that are still haunting their life today, many decades later. But it does not have to be this way. In this teaching, we'll help you identify the mental and emotional blocks that are holding you back and keeping you stuck, and how you can help your inner child make sense of what happened to you so you can finally let go and move on. Okay, David, so in your experience working with clients on these issues, why is it so difficult to let go of stuff that has happened to us in our childhood?
Well, I think as you said in the introduction, and for those of you who are new subscribers and not sure what we mean by the inner child, it might be worth me just spending a few seconds to describe this. The inner child is a label that we give to a part of your mind. You may already identify it as your ego or your subconscious mind, or maybe your emotional mind. I prefer the label of the inner child, and I'll show you on this session why that works better. And so it's that part of your mind, you're absolutely right in your introduction. It's that part of the mind that is holding on, that won't let go. And so what it does inside of you, it creates a kind of internal struggle or fight where there's one part of you that knows it's almost foolhardy to hold on to things that have happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. But this part of the mind is holding on like grim death. I always think about it, when you pick up those dogs and they won't let go of the bone. It's like the mind just will hold on and won't let go of those memories, those thoughts, and those beliefs. So here's one of the tricks that I'd like to share with you in the Wu Wei Wisdom model. Instead of asking yourself, why can't I let go? Ask yourself, we call it the flip. Why are you choosing to hold on? And what that does, that puts the responsibility back onto you to answer that question. So why are you choosing to hold on?
You're so right about this feeling of inner conflict, because we know it's unhealthy to have almost like these flashbacks, these thoughts and feelings connected to our past. But then there is this, it's like it's stuck within us. And you've just said, we're choosing to hold on, we're choosing to keep stuck. And I guess the first thing my ego or my inner child says back to me when you ask that question is, well, I didn't choose for those bad things to happen to me. I didn't choose my childhood experiences. I was almost like a victim of them. So my inner child doesn't like that flip question almost.
No, the inner child doesn't like the flip question. But funnily enough, when you open in the first way that question, why can't I let go? That makes you the victim as well. And I like what you said, and that's absolutely right. So you did not begin that or start that. You are the victim of the incident that happened, and that may be a dysfunctional family or a parent or some kind of abuse, sexual, physical, emotional. Yes, you were a victim of that, but don't fall into the trap of being the victim of your own thinking. And so when you say, why can't I let go? It's almost like taking the control away from you. And you're absolutely right. When you flip the question, the inner child will dislike that, because now the inner child has to tell you why they're choosing to hold on. And it makes them accountable. The part of your mind that we're calling the inner child does not like to be accountable. So once you can ask him that question, why are you choosing to hold on? Then they'll say what you said. Well, Look what happened. Here's injustice. Here's unfairness. This shouldn't have happened. My parents didn't love me. My parents rejected me. My parents abandoned me. Whatever it is. And I always say to my clients, that's true. I accept that. I accept that that happened. What are you going to do about that? And that's the question.
And that word accountability is very powerful because there is a definite difference between, we are not saying we are accountable for what happened
That's right.
in our childhood, but we are now accountable for how we deal with it, how we mentally and emotionally and spiritually, where we park that memory, that experience, and the after effects of it, if you like.
Well, that's so profound, Alex, and so life-changing because as you can imagine, I speak to 6, 7 clients a day and they tell me some horrific stories. And by stories, I don't mean it didn't happen. I mean, it did happen. They tell me their life story. They tell me what they had to go through. They tell me that the abuse that they received. They tell me about the dysfunctionality. They tell me about the poor parenting that they received. And frankly, I'm absolutely amazed. And that's why I say to you, if this is you, how awesome are you? I don't know how you got through it. Do you know how you got through that? And then what I don't understand is time after 10, 20, 30, 40 years after, you're kind of blaming yourself. You're saying there's something wrong with me. It's my fault. Why am I holding on to this? That's the question. Why are you holding on to this? Because in actual fact, you have come through it. I don't like the word survive. I certainly don't like the word victim. I much prefer the word victorious. You are victorious. You've come through that. Why do you want to hold on to that and not let go? Hopefully in this video, I'll be able to answer that for you.
So I think really we can look now at what are the top reasons, the most common reasons that you hear from your clients in terms of why they are choosing to hold on, that accountability of choice. Why are they they suffered as a child because of things that were out of their control, but now they are allowing themselves to suffer still because of how they are mentally, spiritually, emotionally dealing with it.
Well, the way that I would view it is the umbrella term is their childhood, the parenting that they received, is not the way that they think it should have been. And then in that umbrella, it will split down into lots of different variations, which you may have one of these. One of the main ones I hear daily, it's unfair, injustice. No parent should treat their children the way that they treated them. Second one, my parents, my mother, my father, both didn't create a feeling of love for me. They would say that I was a mistake. I was born. I shouldn't have been born. If it wasn't for me, they would have had a happier life. The third one I hear repeatedly, rejection or abandonment. My parents left me, or one of the parents left. We went through a divorce. I was sent off to my grandparents. And so in the umbrella of my childhood is not the way I expected it or wanted it to be, then we start to split down into the individual ones. So I've given you the 3 main ones there.
So within those realities, those experiences could have been real, actual experiences,
Absolutely.
or they could have been amplified by a misunderstanding we had as a young child.
I don't think that matters, Alex.
Yeah, it doesn't matter because it still has the same profound effect on us as a young child.
And so when I'm working with my clients, I sometimes throw them because they work with other counselors and they will spend sessions and sessions and sessions talking about the childhood experience. And I just agree with them. I say, yes, if you think that happened, that happened. Mm-hmm. I don't care if it didn't happen or it was, you say, not quite as bad as you thought it, or there was other circumstances. Because now you're talking to the part of the mind, the inner child. And if he or she thinks it happened, let's accept it's real. It happens. It's what I call the story. the inner child story. And so we're accepting the story. I don't need to spend sessions and sessions debating whether the story was actually true or not true. We'll accept the story.
Yeah.
You believe it happened? It happened.
So I guess the two avenues that then, in terms of what, as a child, how we made sense of it in our mind and how our inner child is now we're adults, how our inner child is still trying to make sense of it, is, I guess, that you get a fork in the road. You either blame yourself for what happened. I'm a bad person. There's something wrong with me. Or you hold on to, or you blame others. You hold on to a sense of profound unfairness and injustice, and that rights need to be wronged. And so there's self-blame and there's blaming others. But that, while we keep throwing fuel onto the fire of that blame, wherever we're apportioning it, it keeps the memory, it keeps the experience, it keeps the story very much alive, very much in the present day, and it taints our current life and our future potential.
But more importantly than that, Alex, you explained that very, very, very well. That fork, as we talk about often in the Wu Wei model, and you explained it right, is that when we do the fork and we either blame ourselves, it must be me, that's what I call the vow, must be me, there's something wrong with me. And then you can go on to say, I'm not good enough, I can't cope, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I have no value, I depend on more other people. Or it must be them, wasn't they horrific, they treated me terrible, and all of that. What you're doing, you're disabling yourself because you're putting your power into other people's hands. You're unpowering yourself instead of empowering yourself. I want you to empower yourself because remember, what we're talking about here did happen. I'm accepting that it happened. It happened many years ago. Why? This is the question for you. Why are you allowing it to define your life and who you are? And this is one of the main reasons why I do these teachings, because I do not want your childhood to define your life, your decisions, how you look after yourself, how you care for yourself, how you care for other people. I do not want things that happened to you many years ago to cloud that accountability for you making decisions and using it as a justification.
And if I was your client, I'd say, well, David, nor do I want it to define me. But it's like, if I'm blaming myself or I'm expecting a right to be wronged or someone to apologize to me or the injustice to be corrected, if I'm blaming other people, it's like a torture because there can be no, in most circumstances, there can be no positive resolution to both of those trains of thought. If I blame myself, I think I'm not a good person. I can never get off that carousel of despair. If I'm blaming others, looking for rights to be wronged, more often than not, that's never going to be corrected. And it's like I'm stubbornly stuck on these carousels of despair.
So I agree with that. That's what you just said. And clients do say those exact words to me. Then you go back to the question, so why, with those two alternatives that you've given out, why are you choosing to hold on? And ask yourself this question. As Alex does this role play, just do it yourself. Alex explained perfectly. You've got the two alternatives. They're both alternatives. You will not get you as what you want. They disempower you. So why are you choosing to hold on?
I think because I think my inner child sees the alternative as just accepting what happened as if it was okay when it wasn't okay. And that it's almost accepting what happened to the inner child almost feels like it's very disempowering, even though part of me, whether it's my adult self, my authentic self, or my Shen, my spiritual self, is also saying to me now, well, yeah, but the only way that you can actually empower yourself is through acceptance. But my inner child is telling me the opposite. Does that make sense?
It does, because I think the inner child, and this is why I like the analogy of the inner child, because when you see, and Alex did a great job of role playing there, when you come down to it, instead of looking at it through a mature perception, you're looking at it from the view of a 6, 7, 8-year-old child. And it sees, for instance, acceptance as a kind of a surrender. When it's the farthest thing from it, because what you're actually doing now by refusing to let go is a surrender. You're keeping yourself in that energy, that energetic, and you're keeping the inner child trapped, where acceptance is, I have to accept that it happened, because in reality, it happened. I also accept that whatever way I got through it, I got through it. Aren't you awesome? Aren't you amazing? Now, how do we make sure that it does not repeat itself? And this is what I see time and time and time again with my clients. The modern word that Alex told me a few sessions ago is called confirmation bias. I call it the carousel, that you keep on repeating the same thing because you haven't changed your belief system. You still either see yourself as the victim, or you see yourself as somebody who is going to be bullied and taken over, and other people are superior to you and better than you, and you need their validation. And both of those are making you the victim. And that's why you need to speak to your inner child. You need to explain to him and explain to her that you have already been victorious. Why do you want to hold on to something that happened so long ago? Proving, what point are you proving? What would it be like if you just let it go now? What would it be like for you? Just do that experiment for yourself if you just let it go, released. What would change? I can tell you what will change the most in your life. Then you'll feel what I call chi. Then you'll feel that energy coming through you, because you'll step off the carousel of despair, stuck into these old, familiar, destroying belief structure that we are trying to change. So you open yourself up to follow your path. That's what will change. The person that did or managed whatever you did all that time ago, they're probably even dead now, aren't they? Or they won't know any difference. It'll only be you taking care of yourself.
And do we need to, in this process of encouraging our inner child to let go of the story, as you call it, I think part of it is because the inner child still can't make sense of what happened.
Yeah.
Because as a child, these traumatic events and situations that have left a lasting legacy, often involving people who we loved, cared for, trusted, looked up to, were dependent on. It's like the inner child is searching for like a rational understanding, a reason, something to cling on to make sense of it. It's like our inner child is still confused. How do we help our inner child make sense of what happened, even if there isn't a kind of a logic or a reason to it, because it was, what happened was totally inappropriate, totally illogical, totally not okay?
That's a brilliant question, because this inner child story, and we've done a video on the inner child story. I'd recommend you looking at the inner child story.
I will put a link in the show notes to that.
Because the inner child story is so powerful and so strong for you for this specific reason that you're talking about. Because for a child, and remember that's why I like the metaphor of the inner child, that part of your mind is viewing things as though they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They see things as very black and white, very extreme, good, bad, right, wrong, up, down. There's nothing in the center. And so what I'm recommending that you use the metaphor of the inner child, because as Alex said, rather than looking externally for other people to trust and to value and to love and to get their love and value back, I want to encourage you to look internally. So I love the image that you now, as a mature, conscious person, you are the spiritual parent right now. That part of your mind is the spiritual child. And what we want to do is to get that connection with yourself. So instead of the inner child being over here and you, the intellectual, the mature you, whatever you want to call it, and you're having this internal battle as the inner child looking outside at other people, blaming them, looking for validation, looking for approval, looking not to be rejected, looking at a hierarchical. I want him to turn the vision to you. So what we're doing then is we're bringing them both back together so they don't put that finite trust in other people. You put it in yourself. You start to trust yourself. You start to rely on yourself. That's why I like the word accountability. I can tell you one of the things when I'm working with my clients on their inner child, one of the things I hear virtually on every client, the mature part of you, the intellectual part of you, does not listen to the inner child. You ignore it. You put it to one side. You try and move away from it. You think it's a pain. Some of my clients will call the inner child the devil. It's like a monster. When it's not, it's you. It's you when you're about 6, 7, 8, 9, looking, as Alex says, looking for answers, looking for understandings in a world where things happen that are not reasonable, that don't make sense. And so you have to let it rely on you. And that's where the answer is to your question.
And do we also, as well as teaching the inner child that it can trust you, it should rely on you now as the adult? Do we also need to teach the inner child that, as you say, things don't always go the way that it should go? People don't always treat you in a fair or just way. Other people are also on their journey, or other people may be suffering from emotional imbalances. Do we have to also kind of ground our inner child in almost like the realities of everyday life? I'm not saying like we say that you've just got to think, oh, well, that's okay, I was mistreated, or it was okay that I suffered this profound challenge as a child, but that it's like this, my dear, these are the realities of life, but we can withstand these storms, we can withstand these setbacks if we work together and trust each other.
Well, I think that's what I would want to promote, that you've already gone through this situation and you look at yourself as being the victim of this situation, where I, quite frankly, with all of my clients, I've never met a victim. I've met very powerful, victorious people. But the way they view the situation is through the wrong lens. And so when you have this internal conflict in your mind, this separation, where part of your mind is always looking to other people for this approval and validation and strokes and to be told you're a good girl or you're a good boy, and then part of your mind is looking one way, and then you as the intellectual, as the grown up, as the mature person is looking the other way. You always have this internal like tug of war inside of you. So the first thing we have to do, as we're suggesting, is listen to the child, answer the child's question. But instead of the child, we have to convince the child that rather than looking outside of you, it can only look at you as the parent who can look after him. And that builds up the trust. And here's another issue I hear constantly. It's about trusting. How can I trust other people? How can I trust this? How can I trust in that? The first step is, can you trust yourself? Can you be accountable? Can you have self-responsibility? You said, we live in a reality where, I'm sorry to say, things do not go the way that you want them to go. And so we have to be together to be able to, and this is what Wu Wei means, it's a spiritual teaching, to be in your flow, to be able to flow through all of the problems and the inconsistencies and the people that say one thing and do something else. Because they do it, don't you do it. Have your integrity.
I can see how this teaching of inner trust and inner referral and inner reliance will help us if we've gone down the fork of the road of blaming other people, wanting justice, seeking an apology, which we're never going to get. But what if we've gone down the fork in the road where we're blaming ourselves? We're blaming, it was my fault. It was my fault that I was abused. It was my fault that my parents got upset with me. It was my fault that my parent left the family home. It was my fault. And we blame ourselves, and we're stuck on that carousel. Because if we're stuck in that story and then you say, well, it's all about turning in and trusting yourself. Well, the first thing my inner child would say to me is, well, how can I trust you when it's all your fault? That kind of, how do we reconcile that?
So this is the client I normally get on that fork. And so this is now what I would say, this is when you as the adult have to now impart the spiritual teachings that we call life lessons onto that part of your mind that we're calling the inner child. I hope you're following this. I'm not being too complicated. But you have to build on the child. And these are the conversations I normally have with my clients is, how can it be your fault? Is that based on truth, honesty, and integrity? Do you believe that you as a child, or do you believe children are responsible for adults? And you have to go through that life lesson with that part of your mind, because the child has flipped it round the wrong way. And that's what the flip is so powerful, because the child has done a flip, or we sometimes call it the pendulum. It's gone right to the other side, and it's taken responsibility for the actions of responsible adults in their lives. It's made themselves responsible. Now, this is quite understandable when you're a child and you haven't got the conscious reasoning that you have now as an adult, but the child is locked into this way of thinking. And to answer your questions, that's why we do the golden thread. That's why we work with the child. That's why we get down to the truth and we say to the child, so therefore you're telling me that you believe, for instance, using your example, you believe a 6-7-year-old child is responsible for their parents' behavior. Do you believe that? Do you believe a child, 6 years old? So if you had a niece or a nephew that came to you and said, Auntie, Uncle, my mother beats me every night, you'd say to them, well, that must be your fault then. You must be responsible. Of course you wouldn't. And that's the thing that brings it together, based on what I call Shen, spirituality, truth, honesty, and integrity. And that's what takes it work. And with my clients, that's what we normally have to work on. We have to change the inner child story. Yeah. Not easy.
Yeah.
Because the inner child has held this story for many, many years.
And I can see that young child that we once were, from the point in time that we drew those conclusions, from when we blamed ourselves for the very first time. It's as if we've never questioned the validity of that story until this moment in time.
Exactly, Alex. That's the perfect way to describe it, much clearer than I described it. And that's what the golden thread does. It cuts through all of the mess.
And just to clarify, David, when you say golden thread, you mean the golden thread process?
Yes, the golden thread process. And again, if you're interested in this, we've done several videos, or perhaps if you join our Facebook community, we talk about the golden thread. The golden thread is a process of remembering that you are the creator of your emotions. So once you accept that every emotion that I experience, I've created it, then you can ask yourself the self-inquiry question, why? Why did I create that? Until you come down to the core. So the core that you gave me is, I am responsible for my parents' behavior. Now you can question, is that true? Do you believe children are responsible for their parents' behavior? And that's the question that can change that and start to bring you and the inner child together. Because I do not believe 6-year-olds, 7, 8-year-olds are responsible for a dysfunctional behavior of their parents. Do you? I certainly don't. And so if your inner child does, that's the thing that you have to work with them. And what we call in our model, reparent. And we've done a couple of videos on reparenting the child.
And so that principle would also apply that if we believe we were a bad person, and that's why these things happen to us, and that if we still believe we're a bad person, if we use the golden thread process, which is obviously the method you use with all your clients in your one-to-one consultations, if we use that self-inquiry questioning process to really question the validity of that belief, I'm a bad person, I'm not good enough, this is why these things happen.
And can I tell you what normally happens when we do that work? It normally takes, it's different for everyone, but relatively short, minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It normally comes down to the belief, and I say, well, why do you believe that? And do you know what they say? I don't know. And so, as you just described, they're building their life on a foundation of a fallacy, a complete untruth. They can't even tell you why they believe it. And once you can get to that and talk about that, what you're doing, this is the word I like to use in my clients, we deconstructing the story piece by piece, because this story is false. You are amazing, especially if you've come through a dysfunctional childhood. I don't know how you did it. You don't know as how you did it. You are victorious. Do not keep on returning to the scene of the accident to kind of do a drive-by. It's time now to move on the other way. And so you have to deconstruct this story. You have to bring the inner child and you together so you're in harmony, in balance, in flow, or in Wu Wei. And then together you move on. And then you start writing a new story from this day forward and stop looking in your rear view mirror at the old story. It's time to write the new chapters now, and it's time to move on.
Thank you, David. And we've done so many other teachings that will help you with this subject and help you understand it and help you do the coming together work, the reparenting with the inner child. So I will put links in the show notes below to many teachings we've done on the childhood story, the inner child vow, moving on from childhood trauma, and lots of teachings we've done on the inner child reparenting as well. I really hope this has helped you. If it has, please just let us know, comment below, and also maybe share the teaching with someone else who you think may also benefit from it. David works every week with clients all over the world by Zoom video call. And if you are interested in learning more about David's consultations, I shall also put information in the show notes below about those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.